In this video, we're going to build a sort of mini ChatGPT that we can run locally. We'll be using the Mixtral large language model via Ollama. We'll interact with that via the llmlite LLM library, and then the chat part is going to be provided by a library called Chainlit. So let's go over to the terminal and we're going to create a file called chat.py. We're going to then import Chainlit at the top, and then we're going to introduce this annotation cl.onMessage. And then we'll define the function. It takes in a message. And so what happens is every time the user writes a message, it's going to come in here. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to echo the user back the message, and then we'll call message.send. Now we're going to go over to the other tab and we're going to run chainlit run, and we'll pass it the name of our file. And then we're going to pass in the -w, and that means it's going to watch the file and update, and then -h, so that means it's going to run it in headless mode and will manually launch the browser. Let's now open the browser, and so this is what we'll see when we first launch it, and we can type our message in at the bottom. So we'll type in hello Chainlit, and as you would expect, it very, very quickly comes back echo hello Chainlit. Okay, so far so good. Now let's get it to do something more interesting. So we're just going to update that message just so that it's empty. So we're going to send an empty message as soon as we receive the user's message, so that it knows, hey, we're actually doing something. And now let's go up to the top and we're going to import llmlite LLM. And if we now come back down into the onMessage function, we'll create a system message. We're then going to create ourselves a variable, an array of messages. We'll put the system message in there. And then we're going to also append into that the message that just was sent to us by the user. Now we're going to call our LLM. So we're going to use the completion function so that everything remains asynchronous. We'll pass in the name of the model, pass in that array of messages, and then make sure that we put the response as streaming so that we can see the response as it comes back rather than all in one go. And then if we come down, we're going to iterate over the response. We'll then pull out the content from each chunk, and then we'll add it into that message that we created at the top. And then once we've done all that, we're going to update the message. So let's come back to the browser again and let's see if we can ask it a question. So I'm going to ask it, what is Apache Kafka in up to 5 bullet points? Let's see what it comes up with. So I think this is probably a reasonably good answer, I would say. Let's now ask it about topics. So can you explain topics to a 5-year-old? And you can see it doesn't really know what I'm talking about because it doesn't currently have the context of the previous message. So every time we do a message, it's sort of starting from scratch. So let's fix that. So we come back to our file and we're going to use another annotation. So this is called the onChatStarts. We'll have the start chat function. Let's just go down and get our system message and we'll bring it up into here. And then we're going to create a user session variable called message history, and we'll put the system message in there. And then if we come back down into our onMessage function, we're going to update the messages variable. So rather than just being a variable, we're going to use that session history variable instead. And then finally, let's come down to the bottom and make sure that the response also goes into that messages array so that the chatbot knows all the history of what we've asked and what the answers have been. Let's save the file and then we'll come back to the browser again. And what's cool here is we can actually go and see like what were the previous questions that we asked. We can select that Kafka question. Let's ask that again. So the answer is pretty much the same as what we had before. And now let's click on the topics one. And now this time it's much better, right? It knows we're meaning Kafka topics rather than just a generic topic. And so it comes up with an analogy of what topics are. I think it's not too bad, the answer. Now I write a journal and I'd quite like to use an LLM to explore some of the entries to see what was I thinking about, what was I feeling at different times. But I don't really want to upload my data to ChatGPT or Perplexity AI or a similar tool like that. And so Chainlit's quite helpful here because we can actually also upload files. So let's update our code to handle that. So we're going to just get that messages line and we'll just move that up to the top. And then any files that you upload into the Chainlit app will be available under message.elements. We're going to check whether there are any, and then we'll iterate over them. We're going to put the content of the files. We're just assuming these are just text files. We're going to put the content of the files into our messages array, so i.e. into the context, and then that's available to the LLM. And then we're just going to write a confirmation message saying, hey, we've uploaded the file, and then we'll send that confirmation message straight away. And everything else stays exactly the same. So I'm not going to use one of my actual journal entries, but I got ChatGPT to write me one. So let's have a look at that. This is way more lyrical than the stuff I come up with. The stuff I come up with would be really boring to read, I expect. But let's go now back to our UI and we'll drag that journal file onto the UI. And then we need to give it a message. So we're going to say, hey, I want you to summarize this journal entry. As it comes back, this journal entry describes the author's upcoming day. It talks about a planning meeting. And then it kind of explains some of the other stuff that they did, has a team lunch. And how they're hoping to make progress on the bug that they're working on. So one question that I'm curious about is what would you say is the main emotion being expressed? So it says they're determined to make progress. It also talks about a bit of nostalgia. So I think it's pretty good. Let's see if it can figure out are there any other people mentioned. And so it kind of mentions that there are other people sort of mentioned in passing, and then in particular it identifies Alex. So I think it's done a pretty good job. I think this is going to be quite a useful tool for me to go and explore my previous thoughts. Now that you've seen Mixtral used in a chatbot, you probably want to know how it compares to its cousin Mistral 7B. We've got you covered in this video here, where you can see the responses the two models give to the exact same prompts.